Rex, why don't we run through just a couple of quick slides here. This is the first project, Headwaters Lofts, or the Lofts at Headwaters. This is the southwest corner on Superior Street, and as Joe indicated, it's approximately a $68 million project. The one metric that's missing from this slide is the fact that we're talking about approximately 330 public parking spaces within the project itself, which is a net add to what already exists of approximately 66 parking spaces. This picture is from the back side of the project. If you spend any time over the summer at the festivals, this is actually that landing area, that parking spot looking back into the project. And as Joe indicated, and I think Rex should have indicated, we have spent, to their infinite credit, a lot of time with the festivals. We have tried to equip our building to help serve the festival goers with power and parking and so forth. And this picture is taken directly adjacent to Club Soda restaurant. You can see here to the right of your screen. And I won't get into the site plan other than to say this plan has gone through and been approved by the Plan Commission. We did not need to seek a rezoning. We simply got approval for our primary development plan. As you can see here to the left and to the right of the project, there are townhomes that are contemplated to be constructed. And then along Superior Street, you'll see that we're proposing some office retail uses next to Club Soda. This is a very straightforward and simple statement of the sources and uses. As Joe indicated, with the exception of the state who's providing some state tax credit equity. They've committed to this project already. 100% of the expense of constructing this project will be borne by the developer. Premier, before you on the table, is an $88 million investment, 912 space parking garage. I won't read the metrics for you other than to say that we're looking at a net gain of approximately 240 parking spaces on day one, increasing over time to at least additional public parking of 250 spaces.
Tom, is that orientation? So I'm looking at it from Superior and Harrison.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. That's southwest corner. Yep. And this is the exact opposite, Tim. This is if you were standing on the Harrison Street Bridge, closest to Promenade Park, this would be the perspective that you're looking at. And this is just a three-dimensional rendering of what is before you on the table. We did take this project 2 weeks ago through Plan Commission. Plan Commission has a business meeting next Monday to hopefully approve it. As with the other project, we have townhomes interspersed throughout the project. And I think what's really cool about this project is this amenity area, which we hope will naturally flow into the greenway, up against the St. Mary's River. This is a 6-story structure, again, with approximately 921 parking spaces. And here is the capital stack for this project. Once again, with the exception of the CREED credits, which are pending before the IEDC, this project also will be fronted entirely by the Barrett Stokely team. And then here is our hopeful construction timeline. As you will see, even though that we got started on the Lofts at Headwaters well before the Premier Riverfront project, there's a fair amount of site prep that needs to occur at the Club Soda parking lot. So Premier Riverfront will begin hopefully Q1 of 2020. And there you go. there are the two projects put forth by the development group, Barrett Stokely. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
What's the experience from the folks using the Riverfront with regards to Premier? How much space is there between the Riverfront and the private property? And what's going to be on that Riverfront for folks who can't afford rents downtown, right? We built Promenade to be something hopefully that would be welcoming to everyone, and price points welcoming to everyone. So I'm just curious about what the experience is going to be in terms of just the feel in the distance. I'm worried it's not going to be welcoming.
So
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful building. And then when am I going to be able to access every building?
right. So we have had, I believe, 3 design meetings with the Parks Department and their designers on what's happening directly on the riverfront. There is a flood wall that exists today that has to remain, which is what this angle represents. In working through with the designers, our intent is to create a private area for the residents that's open and can be seen from the riverfront. And then we will continue across from the park, across Harrison. And we, I think in our last meeting, committed to the Parks Department to provide them the ground due north of our west wing for public access. That public access, and we're waiting for their designers to come back, is where the riverfront walkway would come through our project down to the riverfront. They've talked about numerous things, and I don't want to crack the egg open before it's ready, but they've talked about kayak loading. They've talked, possible arbor continuance, and I think that's an option. I'm not sure that will happen, but there will be access from the park along the river. It will be down approximately 8 feet from where we are elevation-wise, just because of what's required by the floodway. But the intent is to make it feel like it's one development, one park as you go from west to east along the river. So you would be able to access through from the park all the way through to Headwaters and all tie together. It'd be ADA accessible. Yeah.
Can I just speak to that a little bit from the city's perspective too? So we've been working with Land Collective to do our riverfront planning. It actually, before phase 2 planning really got underway, we were still, working with them in the initial stages when we were talking to Barrett Stokely about the other project. And we said, hey, this is close to Riverfront. We should bring in the Land Collective group and just sort of make sure that we're all on the same page here. So we had a meeting with Barrett Stokely team, with Land Collective, and Land Collective basically vetted it from the public side. Like, yeah, their specialization is how to make this a great development that serves them, serves the residents, and everything. But how does it speak to the broader community? Land Collective made probably 24 recommendations on the design of the Lofts project. I think they integrated just about every single one of them. The project was initially set back a little ways from the street. They're like, no, we want to create an engaging street front. You need to bring this more towards the street so you can kind of create that walkable sense. So that was the first project. So actually one of the criteria that went into the RFP for the Premier site was saying this site essentially has 4 front facades. It's such a public location. It's surrounded by Headwaters Park on one side, Promenade Park on the other. You need to make sure that this design addresses that, to speak to the hundreds of thousands of people who don't live here that visit the site every year. And working with Land Collective was actually one of the criteria for the design of the project. And even the architecture of this sort of speaks to the Riverfront initiative. You can kind of see that the slope of the roof on the front part of this building sort of harkens to the Promenade Park Pavilion. Now we're talking about the actually specific public space that is part of this project. One of Land Collective's recommendations was, hey, you guys need to make sure that you're going to have these amenity spaces. Make sure that maybe they're not entirely public spaces, but there's more than just straight up public and strictly private. There's a kind of a quasi public private feel. So they recommended they bring their amenity spaces down to the ground floor so that it would create that activity along the riverfront. Also, that the northwest corner, sort of by the Harrison Street Bridge, is slated as probably a restaurant, hopefully, and making sure that that area outside of the restaurant can still be on the property was more like a plaza feel, like a public plaza outdoor dining feel than strictly for the residents. And the big takeaway was just making sure that there was a flow from public or from private to public spaces. That was the thing that they emphasized over and over. And they've really been pretty great to listen and integrate land collective suggestions on that. I mean, we've had half a dozen meetings with them, and it's been very, very collaborative.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
How much distance in feet or whatever metric from the riverfront to the front of the private property? Do you know?
We can go to
So the wall, the river kind of bends around right there. It's making a big swoop right here. From the wall to the river's edge, it averages somewhere between 75 and 90 feet. So it kind of goes in and out. It probably doesn't feel like that because there is a tree line there, and it kind of. So if everybody visualizes the tree line as our property, that's not the case. It's the wall that's behind the tree line.
Everything from the wall to the river is public.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any public access to the building beyond the garage? Is there going to be retail that you're going to put in here on the riverfront? Is that a requirement of the development agreement? We've done that before, like with the Ash building. They have put retail on the ground floor. Is that something that's going to be on the riverside or on the street side? Or?
The retail, Tim, is contemplated to be along Calhoun Street. I'm sorry, Harrison Street. Harrison Street, and right now we've got about 30,000 square feet of committed retail, with the option of even increasing that to 45,000 should the demand exist.
Is that part of the development agreement?
It is described, the project itself is described in the development agreement. I don't know that it's safe to say, John, that it's an absolute requirement. What is required with our development agreement is that we build the project that we said we were going to build. So by incorporating the project description, I would say that yes, it's a commitment to.
When we negotiated the economic development agreement, or as we negotiated the economic development agreement, the project was still forming. I think Nancy and Joe were, in response to the RFP, I think the RFP suggested retail. So we did not have artificial square footage requirements, but in the economic development agreement, the economic development agreement requires them to produce final plans from preliminary plans, and the preliminary plans incorporate 30,000 feet of retail. We left room in the economic development agreement so that as the project becomes more concrete, that we would be able to make adjustments as long as they're substantially similar to the preliminary plan. So the answer to your question is no, there isn't a bright line, you must have 30,000 square feet, but they have produced preliminary plans that we've approved that have 30,000 square feet. And so now that cannot really change except for, an agreement between the parties.
Will that agreement be final before we would allocate the money from the CIP, John? Do you know?
Should be,
It's
yes.
likely.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
How do the rents compare?
How do the rents compare?
Between the two projects, they will be similar. Riverfront will be slightly higher.
And what about with existing housing?
With the existing housing, it depends on the unit type. When we develop these models, we do economic modeling as well. The idea is to get as broad an economic demographic as you can within it without creating specific, huge luxurious units throughout the entire thing. We have a number of those. We'll have units that rent for $2,300 as far as the townhomes, and some of the riverfront views with large 2-bedroom units. We also have units along Calhoun Street that are 657 square feet, and I think 712 that are smaller, that are built to an economic demographic that wants to see the amenities and the things that we have in a building like this, where we can bring them in between $950 and $1,000 a unit. So the idea is, and it's in order to really lease and lease well, you want to have the broad market as you can get to from an economic demographic. And so that's what we've tried to accomplish with these. They will be priced higher than what is in the market today, But in some unit types, it'll be about the same. And it just depends on unit type, but not appreciably higher out of the box. Part of this is,
I think we have, 25 different unit types?
we tend to build to Dale's chagrin, as opposed to 10 or 12 that are easy to put together and stack. We got about twice that many. And we found from other projects that the greater the variety, the more leasable the building. And so that's really, despite protests to the contrary, that's what we're building.
Are there any low to moderate income in there in any of the buildings?
They're not.
There's 7 townhomes, I think you...
There are,
In this one, I think
in
7.
this one, no, we've
More than
got
that.
4 and 5, I think. Is that right, Nick? Do you remember? I get them confused. I know there's 15 in the other one.
I'll
That
tell
was
you,
the
it's
first one we did.
9 is this, yeah.
It's
Seven
7.
townhomes.
It's
Yeah.
7.
Seven townhomes.
It fluctuated a little bit after we started talking with Parks and Land Collective, because they wanted to see more use along the riverfront for the possibility of retail on the northwest corner. That impacted where our office was going to be, impacted some of the townhomes we originally had there.
And the
We're,
clubhouse.
at that point in time, moved more to commercial use.
And do you manage the properties too? Do you manage the properties
Yes.
yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, we currently manage Seascape Flats
We took over, how long was it?
6 months ago.
6 months ago, when Cityscape Flats was sold, we started to manage it.
Rex, I know, how many units does your company manage? Total?
About 12.
12,000,
12,000,
13.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's really, yeah, I knew it was big.
Yeah, we're not, we're not, we have 300 and
400 employees now.
400. Okay.
I'm curious about, in Fort Wayne, I think it's happened in a lot of downtowns, really the citizens have led development through government, and government expenditure, right? You might not be sitting here without the tens of millions of dollars already invested in Promenade
Right.
Park, planned to be invested in the future.
Mhm.
You give a voice that, I appreciate that. I'm just curious about your experience. There's still a lot of public subsidy required in these projects. And is there a point in time when communities mature to a point where they no longer have to provide that subsidy? Joe showed a slide about the parking demand. Then he mentioned driven by a boutique hotel, commercial office build, residential. So it's private investors putting projects in that grow the demand for parking, really. We don't hear a lot of parking complaints about Promenade Park, but it could be better right now. Bob Harrison Square, we did build a lot of parking. And so is there a point in time when we can say, hey, the private investor, and your experience in other communities, the private investor can afford to build a parking garage themselves without the public subsidy? But it seems to be that's where the subsidy's coming.
Yeah, and you do see it, and we saw it first in Indianapolis, where the bigger the city, Cincinnati the same way. Cincinnati's subsidy along the riverfront with the Banks project was the beginning over the Rhine, because which is north, was a little quicker as people bought things because the buildings were all old, all historic. You had a lot of smaller investors that might bite off a building that might have 8 units in it, or it might have 12. That opens a market, to people doing things without subsidy, because it's hard to break it down. Even Carmel, Indiana, which is has undergone this transformation, and their Monon is, it's really, really nice. I don't think it's any nicer, maybe not as nice as what we think Promenade Park is. And we have on the Monon 11 different properties along trails in downtown Indianapolis and up through Carmel. So we're very attuned to what goes on around it. That's why Riverfront with Promenade, Headwaters Park, all of those amenities and the trail system are huge to how we do things. But to get back, Mr. Rambling, to get back to your question, yeah, they do cross over, but even our new development in Carmel had TIF, bond TIF to build a garage.
Yeah, that's a good example. Carmel, I kind of try to keep up because Carmel's very aggressive in their development.
They were. They're not as aggressive as they used to be by a long shot.
Okay, all right. I didn't know have to have it here, but I'm really curious relatively how much public subsidy would we be contributing to your projects here versus the ones that you've had recently in Carmel?
Carmel's was less because Carmel's rents are going to be about 50 cents a square foot higher. And that's the other thing that you have to recognize is
Smaller
that
garage.
subsidy relates to the market that you're in. If you're building in New York City, you're probably not going to get a lot, but you're going to get about $4 a foot. Midwest, we don't get that. You look at Denver, you look at the West Coast, Phoenix, any of the cities where they have a boom of population moving in, you don't see the subsidies necessary to do it there because the rents drive the deal. In the Midwest, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, if you don't start with the subsidy to get urbanization started, it never starts. It's just the way it is. And it does, as rents, as a people flock to it. Indianapolis, I mean, our housing stock in downtown Indianapolis scared us to death because we had a lot of units down there before any of this started. And we thought, we're going to get murdered by all this new stuff. It just got stronger. Because the more the dynamic takes effect, the more people want to be there. You see old guys like me, you know, people, empty nesters moving downtown. We have a proportion of folks 40 and over in one of our projects in Carmel that was designed, you know, for that. 40% are over 40 years old. That's unheard of in our business. That's new. It's a new market, and you kept hearing about the empty nester market. It's real. But you got to build stuff they want to see. So you can't go in and build an 850 square foot 2-bedroom. They won't rent it. They've got to be, you know, 1,200 square feet, which is the opposite norm of what production builders do. Because production builders that are building to fill it and flip it, they're all about price per square foot, cost per square foot, rent per square foot, get it out the door and move on to the next project. They're not worried about the second round of renting. We are. That's why our square footages are bigger.
Thank you. Thank you for such a full and direct response to my question. Appreciate it.
Net parking, so what do we gain here again, net parking?
So net parking at Premier Riverfront, we're gaining 230 on day one. And as some of the parking commitments burn off, that number is going to increase to perhaps as much as 250. This is a net add. Right now, there's no public parking in that lot. It's a county lot. And it's also worth mentioning that in exchange for the county's cooperation and assistance, they do have a reservation of spaces in the new parking lot. And that number is somewhere between 220 and 250.
Was that on the Headwaters?
Pardon?
That was Premier.
That was Premier.
Premier. The net on Headwaters is plus approximately 60. There's 267 spaces, I believe, right now at Club Soda, and we're talking about 330 public parking spaces when we're under roof and finished with construction. And none of those numbers contemplate the reservation and set aside for the residents of the apartment complexes.
Tom,
Yeah.
when do you expect final word on the Creed credits?
Well, we got a commitment already on Headwaters Lofts. They allocated, guys, was it 5.5 million?
5.5.
And coincidentally, I got a message last night from the IEDC about the request for this project, and I just, due to timing, have not had a chance to call our contact, but I know they're committed, and I know they're committed at a very high level. We're just working through the final numbers.
Well, obviously, this is being asked of this board at some point. Can I ask what the timing is and when we can expect to receive maybe updated information on?
I think we would anticipate as we finalize, our discussions, working with the IEDC on their allocation, I think we would expect to formally come to you for a request probably in February or March.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we have the numbers of what's requested on the public site here today?
No.
Do you remember any of them off the top of your head that you could get some general idea?
No, I don't, we're just not prepared to kind of go through that yet. We're, kind of like what you heard from the developer in terms of the experience of going through Plan Commission to talk about the constructability and the permit ability of the projects, getting that done. They've been talking to their lenders, getting that in place, and, we want to be well prepared to bring this to you and anyone else for what we really need and have the final cost so we can give you the full picture.
Thank you, Nancy.
Can we get a copy of the presentation?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, yep.
Don?
Jim, just a final comment. Rex was kind enough to entertain me for a couple hours a few months ago in Carmel just to look at what they're doing. And I got to tell you, they're the real deal. I mean, I'm very impressed with them. I think they're the kind of people that we want to come to Fort Wayne. So, welcome.
Thank you.
And after that, thank you for your interest. Thank you for.
Just to follow up on what, I'm sorry, Jim,
No,
what Don said, we have been to a number of their sites multiple times to, again, just to ensure, what they do and the quality. We talk to residents, talk to other people, and I mean, it has just been nothing short of impressive. And it's just what they say they do, and you can see it. We felt it, touched it, looked at it, and they have been transparent and just a true partnership. And so we really appreciate that. And again, we certainly appreciate the partnership we've had with the CIB, and I think Joe said it, and I just want to emphasize, I mean, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without this board and the partnership we have with you, the county and others. And so we, as you can hear from Rex, I mean, who's been in many other cities, that it is really good. It was great to hear when we first started talking that, we're, as a community, we're doing things the right way, and we're on this momentum is going to continue, and just really appreciate the partnership and leadership you all have shown.
Yeah,
To the community.
I want to emphasize what she's saying, because we have been in a number of communities and gone, pretty far down the road and spent a lot of time, in some cases, money, and to have this kind of a commitment from everybody where it is unified, where they want to see the projects done, is really, really fun atmosphere to work in. It's not always that way, because you can get in between the we don't want to change versus we want to change, and that's no fun at all, because you're going to get hit from one side or the other. And this has really been a fun experience so far, and I think it'll continue to be that way, because as this gets more and more momentum, there's more buy-in from people. We're trying to figure out how much of a regional draw we will have with this project, and we believe there will be quite a regional draw from the standpoint of people that might live 40 or 50 miles away. When they see all of this, we think that we're going to get tenants coming from that far away that are ready to give up the home. And these are people, my age, they're thinking, hey, it's a lot of fun to live in a place like this. It's Chicago without all the downside. Coming from people that have lived up there. It's very exciting and a great vibe, but there are downsides to living in a monstrous city. But things that are being created here, and the things that we see in Carmel, the things that we've seen as that city has just really started to gel along the Monon from City Center up to Main Street. The amount of people that are walking through construction zones to get to the Fork and Ale restaurant, they had 1,500 people, Dale, when you were in your construction office. And this is a little plaza that's built, and it's not totally finished, and there's dirt, and they had these huge TV screens, and was it the soccer?
It was a soccer game, right?
Soccer game. And there's 1,500 people sitting out there. Of course, it's outside of Sun King Distillery and Fork and Ale, but the place, you couldn't even find a place to sit down. And the amount of people that it attracts and the activity feeds on itself, and when it does, it's amazing to watch that.
Any other questions? Thank you guys very much for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Puts it in perspective, this is great.
Yeah, well, we're hanging around, so if anybody has any questions,